Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's event. My name is Shannon Smith. I'm the Assistant Director here at the Goodman Center for Real Estate at Lehigh University. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Melissa Marsh, Founder and Executive Director at PLASTARC. Melissa is a wonderful affiliate of our program. We're so happy to have her with us. She's worked hard with us over the last 2 years, creating exciting event and content to bring you such great events. And I would like to pass it off to Melissa and get this wonderful event started.
Thank you, Shannon. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to all of our friends and hosts at Lehigh who make this possible, both extending our thoughtfulness to alumni and to the entire real estate, design, construction community in the New York area, and thankfully beyond due to our unique virtual circumstances. I think we're all learning something new these days. So this idea actually came together much earlier in 2021. I think we started working on it in January or something like that. And obviously we're all operating on COVID time, which it sometimes goes really fast and sometimes slows down. But given that extra time, I think we've managed to pull together a really special set of panelists to help us talk about this topic of what TAMI tenants want. So the first point here, a little bit of nerdiness. TAMI is not your aunt or your cousin. TAMI is technology, advertising, media, and information as an industry. So really thinking about those companies and those industries, I would say they've been shaping or reshaping the face of real estate in New York for the last 10 years. Particularly in the New York market, we've classically been a finance hub, maybe a professional services and accounting, but we've really seen an influx of a type of tenant that is maybe more popular on the West Coast. And I think that's really had an important and desirable impact on our real estate market in New York and maybe even on the whole East Coast. And one of the observations that people tend to have about those TAMI tenants is they tend to be ahead of the curve, especially ahead of the curve in something that's really important to us at PLASTARC, which is that of focusing on the employee. What is that employee experience? How is it going? How might we shape buildings around people rather than forcing people into buildings? So I think we've got a great set of folks to help us think about what are TAMI tenants thinking about, doing, struggling with right now, and how might we learn from those perspectives. So I'm going to allow each of my fabulous panelists to introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with Scott Evans, who's a graduate from 1990 and is currently Chief Digital Officer at Related Companies, where he really is on the cutting edge of development, disruption, data, many of these buzzwords, but using them to think about the built environment and particularly some interesting mixed use projects. Can I have you extend that introduction a bit more, Scott?
Absolutely. It's great to be virtually back at Lehigh. And I'm just honored to be part of the panel. I think it's going to be amazing. I think this is a very unique time where mixed use development is extending into like a customer facing, data led, innovative environment. And if you look at what's happening in prop tech, there's a lot of focus upon that. And I think it's a unique environment as we come out of COVID and what's important to people returning to the office or in a mixed use environment. And I think this learning opportunity is an opportunity for real estate developers to kind of reinvent themselves. So looking forward to this discussion today, and I think it's exciting.
Great, thank you for that, Scott. And then next we will go on to another fellow alum, a bit more recent, 16 and 17. We have Adam Goldstein, who is the Senior Operations Manager at Branch, which is an innovative furniture and future of workplace organization. But I guarantee you he thinks about a lot more than furniture. Adam, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your perspective?
Sure thing, Melissa. Thanks so much for the introduction, and very excited to be here chatting with all of you today. Adam Goldstein, class of 2016, working on creating the future of how we furnish workspaces and create environments for employees to engage with the workspace and with the built environment, and going a long way with what you're talking about with PLASTARC. We are constantly looking for ways to create a better experience from start to finish in workspace development.
Excellent, nice to have you, and also a young alum, Adam. And then finally, we have Michael Hudson. Michael is the Director of Transactions and Development at Verizon. And that is really a role that has brought him to all different kinds of things, from co-working to real estate portfolio analysis, really so many of the different pieces of thinking about real estate and business strategy together. And he's had the opportunity to do so all over the world. So brings a global perspective, not just with the current Verizon portfolio, but with also some of his personal background. Michael, can you share a little bit about yourself and your relation to this topic of TAMI tenancy?
Absolutely, Melissa. Thank you for the great introduction. You know, from a scope perspective, we're fortunate, of course, to have 100 million square feet of real estate that we look over. And you said it, hit the nail on the head in the introduction. One of our guiding theories is real estate isn't about space; it's about people. And a lot of what we'll talk about today is kind of the nexus of HR and real estate and how those two interact. And if you make space purposeful, if you make it really a destination, you drive the type of collaboration, attraction, retention, excitement that bring us to the office day in and day out. So we like to think we're at the forefront as a TAMI tenant, and how we view ourselves, and looking very forward to discussing our perspectives on both the current state and how we look towards the future.
Absolutely, Michael. And you are both a tenant and an enabler of other tenancies as well, given the Verizon technology platform. So maybe you can speak to both of those. Great. Well, this is all about kind of how we are working in the future. And so we have a get to know you pop quiz here, or little audience poll. And the first question is, how many days per week did you spend working remotely, that is outside of the physical office, prior to COVID-19 restrictions? And then our second question is, how many days per week do you plan to work remotely or outside of the office in the future? So if you could offer us a quick answer to these questions, and apologies, panelists, your opinions do not count here. You're not allowed to answer. And Amy, I'm not able to see our % response rate, but if after we get a good amount of our participants to jump in there, we can see how that is going. Alrighty, pre-COVID, people are saying that they worked outside of the office 0 to 1 days a week. And in the future, they are looking forward to working outside of the office. A few of them 0. That's quite interesting that some folks imagine that they're going back 5 days a week. That 40% are looking for 1 day a week, 20% 3 days a week, and 10% 4 days a week. So the first thing I would say is that this information has been changing even over the 18 months that we've been experiencing these new ways of working. I think when people first were exposed to this telework opportunity, they were very enthusiastic about it, and we're seeing that enthusiasm waning, but still a remaining expectation that things are not as they were before. And I think that may be one of the definitions of hybrid that we talk about shortly. So nice to get to know you as an audience. Please also feel free to drop questions into the Q&A and chat us if you have anything you'd like to let us know. But maybe with a little bit of that perspective we just heard in the response rate there. Michael, I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what Verizon is doing in terms of return to office. Maybe a little bit about how you have been operating over the last 18 months. And then really, what are you focusing on in terms of addressing things that might be important to people as they're returning to the office, or maybe refreshing the Verizon experience for a hybrid future?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take a step back even further and give a little insight into our overall strategy. And that has been, you know, we have a very fragmented portfolio that is an amalgamation of all the companies and mergers and acquisitions we've done that has formed the company we are today. So we've been working on this theory and this hypothesis of larger campus strategies where we can provide an environment that enables an employee to opt in to as much interaction with an environment and an ecosystem that we can control. So what I mean by that is multi-asset, mixed-use type environments where if an employee wants to show up to the office and come 8 to 6, 2 days a week, they're able to do that. If they want to participate and opt into living nearby or eating on campus, they have all that optionality at their fingertips. So as we moved into the pandemic, we viewed it as, and as terrible as it has been and continues to be, an accelerant of our strategy where we want to, and we believe that we can create the best and the safest environment for our employees. So as the pandemic hit, we moved everybody to a remote environment. We have a certain subset of employees that have to be in the office, technicians, by way of example. So we had a bifurcated strategy that focused on office workers that that weren't mission critical to delivering our product, rolling out. We had a merger in progress with Blue Jeans Technology that allowed us to really roll out more remote working. But as I'm sure we'll get to, you know, it's not the ideal way for collaboration. So as we look towards the future and what we're doing to accommodate the return to office, we are waving people back in 4 different sections, and we started that as of June. And the idea of that is twofold. One, to get people very comfortable with what the new office looks like. We have revamped some space. We've invested a lot into both the cleaning and the office at baseline. A lot of what we called our activity-based workplace was very spread out. It did provide big swaths of collaboration space that can be repurposed, be it temporary or long-term, to allow people the ability to spread. And so we're using this wave in period as a beta test. We have new technology, we have new ways to book space, we have new flexibility, and the partnership with HR is also allowing employees to choose their own adventure, if you will, as they want to return. There's no mandate to return. You're picking how you want to come back. But what we're seeing initially is very heavy on people want to be back in the office. They see the office as a place of collaboration. We can maybe now get our head down work more comfortably done at home. But within the TAMI space, it's such a collaborative centric type industries that being in the office is critical path. So, you know, the short answer to the question of what we're doing, it's technology heavy. We're running, you know, very detailed data analytics as to what we're seeing come back so that we can adjust on the fly. No real estate leader that says, here's what's going to happen, and we know it. If they say we know or we're sure, they're lying. We're going to adapt. We're going to have to be flexible, and both our approach to space, our approach to policy, and our approach to communication has to mirror that.
Gotcha. I'm definitely looking forward to that data coming in and seeing what it's really like. I've heard a lot of people talking about sort of like a first day back to school and all that excitement around getting to see each other after all of this time. But the real question, I think, is whether that stickiness stays or if we settle into a different cadence in the future. You mentioned data, and of course that makes me think of Scott. You've got some great information, and I even think that some of your projects are a model in how we see data at an urban scale. Not just did you come into the building, but kind of what's going on in the whole neighborhood. Could you tell us a little bit more about how data information analytics are helping you with what Michael also mentioned, which is understanding what people want, and kind of what does the market research look like behind buildings and what they include these days?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about Related is we have, across our $60 billion real estate portfolio, we have a large spectrum of assets, right? Whether it's commercial, multifamily, and we've recently, more importantly, gotten into like mixed use. In Hudson Yards, right, which is the largest private real estate development in the history of the US on the west side of Manhattan, became like an interesting case study on how do you pivot the theory around engaging customers, being closer to the customer, and leveraging data to kind of effectively crowdsource what you're looking for and how people want to engage. Like not just a smart city, but like a responsive city. So part of our strategy here was building a digital like product set, whether it's residential apps, commercial apps that are engaging the office tenants or people living on the campus, tools across the entire ecosystem, digital signage, Wi-Fi, and what that's doing is it's basically federating across one version of Scott Evans. So you have a little bit of like informational asymmetry that says, here's the type of person he is, here's what he likes, obviously respecting privacy across the board. And then you can bubble up all those analytics and you can look at it and you can understand what are the important amenities. So under our concept of live, work, and play at Hudson Yards, it became this model. And we can tell you how many people are going to the Edge or to the Vessel, which are amazing experiences, how many people are coming into the offices. And we constantly are using that data to understand the signal and the noise. More importantly, it gives us a level of analytics to get to our business units, whether it's like the restaurant business, and we see all the transactions that are happening on reservations, to understand what type of food do we have the right type of food? Do we have the diverse food? Do we need a food court? So like all these different concepts help us inform how we need to pivot. And we took the pause around COVID to rethink this. And through surveying of our client base, because we have a really robust CRM solution, which I think is unique to real estate, but that's part of our strategy to understand, okay, what did we miss? How can we do better? And as we did that, when we're launching our app, it's basically called Related Life this fall, and it's all focused on the commercial tenant coming back to work. We are offering a series of interesting amenities, right? Whether it's like food delivery to the floors, activation of elevators, amenities that you need to be able like shoppable solutions across the ecosystem that pulls into retail. It could be shoe shines. I mean, we have all these interesting amenities or simplified tickets to get you so that people can plan their life in a simpler fashion. I think that's important, and we'll learn. And I think going back to Michael's point, agility, right? Innovation, and you can build like a microservices layer that helps you understand what people really desire. And I think that's the important realization that we're doing at Hudson Yards. And then we'll talk later about how it's scalable to our other mixed-use developments across the globe.
Absolutely. I think people that know me know that I've always been jealous of the kind of data that even a shampoo company had about, where product was bought, how many units, yada, 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 what flavors, what scents. And it's so exciting to see that we're starting to have those information layers in our buildings. Thanks to programs like yourself, we really can have buildings be much smarter and much more tenant or occupant focused than ever before. So thank you for sharing that. And then shifting to you, Adam, I'm wondering, how does furniture and maybe the more intimate aspects of our office space, how it looks, how it feels, how it smells, what are people looking for? Maybe if you could tell us a little bit about what you see for office trends in the corporate offices, the city center kind of places, as well as maybe what you're seeing in any home office trends, if that's going to continue as well. So what do you have going on in your crystal ball over there, Adam?
If only the crystal ball was that good, but I think having the folks on this panel, Scott at Related and shaping the way that cities look and how they function and serve the overall tenant, Michael at Verizon, and being one of the largest office tenants. And then Branch, we are helping teams execute on this vision for what the workplace looks like in the future. And we've been able to do that throughout the pandemic, both in the hybrid sense of the model where we're helping folks build a workspace in their home. And as we come out of the pandemic, helping those teams reevaluate and reassess what the workplace looks like. Michael touched on what an activity-based workplace looks like, and executing on what that workplace vision with the C-suites of our clients, a lot of whom are TAMI clients. Our furniture specifically jives very well with the workplace vision that these companies are creating, and also helping them create the conversation and create the narrative of how do we want people to interact with the office? How do we want each workstation to look and feel for our employees and who are ultimately their customers? And ultimately what that's helping us do is go back and develop products with the data of customers are looking for this and they want to interact and collaborate in this way. And how can we think about what the next iteration of office furniture looks like? How can we continue hitting and exceeding those expectations that customers have for what the workplace looks like?
Yeah, it seems that there's a lot changing for all of us at this moment in time. With that in mind, we have another poll coming up for you. And this is really about maybe one of the most pressing topics at this moment, which is how these decisions are being made. Are they being made by employees, employers, somewhere in the middle? So we'd love to see or hear your observations as an audience. How are decisions being made about who comes back and when in your organization? Number one is by the organization without employee input. That's the mandate option. Number two, by organization with employee input, or by department and team, or even by the individual or employee. Is some real autonomy being given there? Or is it TBD? Maybe your organization hasn't quite said one way or the other yet. And actually, this is one of the things that we see as a potential gap where, for example, I think people hear what they want to hear, and a company may be talking about flexibility, talking about hybridity, but maybe when it comes down to asking people to come back, they might have maybe a bit more of a conservative response than their employees are expecting. So would love to hear the perspective of our participants. And let's see what we've got. We've got by organization with employee input as the highest percentage there, with a pretty good proportion of by individual or employee directly. So 22%. I'll be fascinated to see if that continues as we roll into the future. Just a few saying that this is just simply by the organization without employee input. And then looks like we don't have any respondents for by department or TBD. So it's nice to see some decision making has been happening, if nothing else. And maybe this brings us, I mean, maybe it is just data, but employee input is something that we capture in a variety of different ways, depending on where we are within our organizations. During our prep call, Scott, I was fascinated by some of the things that you said about your role as a corporate matchmaker, bringing different organizations together who might benefit from proximity to one another when they come into the office. And I think that this is kind of the buzz that everyone is missing, possibly even the most of our work from home or work from anywhere experience. Could you tell me a little bit more about that matchmaking effort and maybe some of the ways you go about it, as well as the benefits it brings to your clients?
I think with the opening of Hudson Yards, and I'll go back to that as a use case, there's like a bit of a change in the gravitational center from Midtown to the West Side. And part of that was around the approach that a mixed-use responsive environment would be a great environment for people to bring, right, their employee base, their associates, and it was something that would also retain like the best-in-class talent. And what we saw was like an interesting mix in our various buildings. For example, in 10 Hudson Yards, you have L'Oreal and Coach and SAP and like Sidewalk Labs and Intersections. You have a very interesting stack of individuals. In 30 Hudson Yards, right, you've got, you know, Warner Media, Wells Fargo, KKR, and related. In 55 Hudson Yards, it's like a legal, you know, and private equity group with Point 72 versus and Cooley and Silver Lake. And then ultimately in 50 Hudson Yards, which will be very interesting when it opens next year, it will be like primarily Facebook and BlackRock. And I think it's interesting juxtapositions of everybody like harmonizing a little bit, but more importantly, our job is to mix it up a little bit at Hudson Yards so we can provide them experiences, shoppable solutions, retail solutions, food solutions, and learn. And I think some of those, it just creates, to me, an interesting ecosystem that helps us understand like the TAMI user, that person, and how we can address it, and every age and demographic. And I think it'll be even more interesting when we get into Santa Clara, which is at the heart of Silicon Valley, which I think is another just innovative hub that we can create. And I think that's how we think about the matchmaking capabilities that we have as related. And I think it's something that I think will continue on when you think about real estate development.
Yeah, those words of kind of experience economy come to mind, that you're really kind of bringing people together. And I have a bit of a quip here that I'm going to throw on you a little bit early, Michael, around how much TAMI tenants truly value this term that we've called community, and a little bit about what that means. So Michael, you've done a fair amount of thinking about co-working, how it serves all organizations, but maybe TAMI tenants uniquely. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's really going on at the intersection there between technology organizations, creative organizations, and this term that we hear from the co-working world about community? What's that all about?
So I'm going to first give Scott a whole lot of credit because what he said differentiates from our perspective, a successful developer from a developer. And it's not to say, you know, the antithesis can't be financially successful. We actually just are completing a 650,000 square foot build to suit with a developer in kind of piece of it's in Santa Clara County. We looked at 55 properties. We had 1A and there was nothing below it. It was night and day, and world-class partners that were taking up space. This was years before Scott's project that he'll talk to, but world-class partners who will remain nameless that just were building corporate campuses. And, you know, to answer the question simply, what makes when we talk about attraction and retention, what makes an employee and that talent sticky? It's the community, it's the environment. I think that's something that has been evolving pre-COVID and will continue to be exacerbated post-COVID, is really, you know, I can work on real estate transactions, be it at Verizon or any of our competitors, and I'm still negotiating leases, I'm still working on the same kind of day-to-day, but what keeps me back? And it's that, you know, the capital that's built between, you know, social capital, the community capital that is really, I want to be able to feel that I'm a part of something. And that's where that extension of co-working, and say what you want, most of us have probably seen the documentary, WeWork changed the narrative, changed the thinking about how we approach space. For right or for wrong, it's a shifted dynamic. So for us, when we're looking at developments like some of the great projects that Related has brought to market, it's really about what makes this different and what makes me want to come here. It's always about that destination feel and why it's different. Scott, you said it earlier, it's an opt-in, but you can control everything with data if you want it to be. So if I'm a coffee fiend, which may or may not be true, and I know that I opt into the Starbucks on campus and I get an update saying, hey, you like to have a coffee around 12:40, you should probably order it now, because, you know, the Monte Carlo simulation we ran on Wednesday afternoons, show us that at 12:45 that line picks up. So I've now got real-time data that makes my life easier. So that's what people are paying premiums for. That's why WeWork has had the success they've had. You know, let's table that debate for another conversation. But it's that community. That's what makes your company sticky, because we see the metrics. Millennials change. You know, we're work for 12 to 15 companies over their lifetime. We want to, if we're going to invest in talent and we're going to curate talent, we want it to stay as long as possible. So it's that community. It's designing that space to make the workplace truly a destination. That's your secret sauce.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. And it is, Michael, it is too bad that that organization went down in flames due to a couple of super ego personalities.
Right.
But I think that you're right. The planning principles of, you know, people being closer together, more diversity in spaces, you know, these are proven principles that even go back to, you know, sort of the fundamentals of designing good cities, and making sure that you have all of that mix. That's the sort of je ne sais quoi that you're putting in when you're doing a really thoughtful development. Some of the ones that you mentioned as well, and also denser cities, both more dense and more diverse cities are more economically viable, right? You've got that perspective of avoiding that kind of monoculture, that if one thing has a problem from an economic perspective, it doesn't kill everything else, so to speak. And I think part of that is driving the interest that we're seeing in mixed use these days as well. I know, Adam, that you've thought a lot about where our buildings and our work life and our residential or home life intersect, and maybe even exploring where co-working is going. Is it getting closer to where people live? Is it maybe becoming part of the office landscape, or maybe is it going to be part of residential environments? Might we see places to work that are much more close to our houses than we've seen before? Adam, I'm wondering if you have any observations that you can share with us about that world of the intersection of our homes and our office settings.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for the question. And I think one of the biggest fallacies around work life has been stripped away more or less over the pandemic, and that's we are only productive when we are in the office. And it's been proven over the past 18 months that that's no longer really the case. Workspace and how it's been viewed over the past, call it 20 years, especially since the .com bubble, has been Workspace is a perk. And Workspace is something that employer offers to employee as a pull to get them to work for us. And now the narrative is shifting a little bit, where the balance and the ways in which variability in which you can work for your employer is changing. And with that, the workspace opportunities need to change as well. And so what you're talking about with the larger co-working providers like WeWork, it's they've changed the narrative in what that workspace looks like. And now it seems like we're in this next iteration point where we're seeing satellite offices pop up closer to people's homes. We're seeing different opportunities for people to choose where and when they work. And ultimately, like how that is provided by the employer. So we're seeing all of these start to come into play between the various players in the industry, whether it is the developers of real estate, the employers themselves, or folks like us here at Branch who are helping create these experiences in the workplace. Ultimately, it's going to be a narrative that is continuing to evolve, and how employers want to attract talent. Will they be a global workforce where the only tether is the Slack channel or something along those lines, or is it in the physical space as well? I know myself, I live pretty far away from the rest of my company, but we are in the showroom in New York today together, and we were yesterday, there is just a different environment. There's a different energy about it. So having those different opportunities available to employees to live and work how they want will be the next iteration of how work-life balance is defined.
Thank you. Enjoyably rosy picture, getting to get back with our colleagues, but also have the flexibility that we've gotten to know here. Thank you for that. Scott, fascinating projects you're involved in, and you've mentioned some of the things that you learned from New York and the Hudson Yards project. You mentioned you're off to the West Coast and some other destinations that we know are pretty high complexity from a social perspective, speculative land prices, not the places where you want to make a mistake in terms of bringing a product to market, so to speak. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you've learned from Hudson Yards and some of the ways that you're applying those learnings as you're developing and bringing this tech and human forward perspective to other locations?
100%. The learnings from, and I'll share a couple slides here as I'm kind of walking through, from Hudson Yards perspective, is that, everybody can see that. So Hudson Yards was an interesting environment where we got into it, and the smart city concept is something we had to bring to life. And it's got all asset classes. And part of the learnings there were fundamentally get your infrastructure in early. And Michael can appreciate this, whether it's like a converged network, understanding what 5G, 4G, millimeter wave, C-band, you need to get an approach. Now to do that, part of the learnings are you need some kind of a holistic aligned approach on a digital strategy. And we call it a digital master plan. And by doing that, that's bringing in all the asset groups together. And what you're basically saying is like, is data important to us? Or how are we going to put the appropriate, whether it's converged network, IoT devices across the campus? Are we going to pull in information from operational EMS systems into our stack? How much of this do we want to have control around? And how important is it to enabling an experience? And I think all of those things we went through at Hudson Yards and we learned about it, and it took a long time. So when we apply it to Santa Clara, which is out in Santa Clara, right out by Levi Stadium. And this is going to be another 240-acre mixed-use environment with residential components. It's going to have a massive food court. We're going to have a pretty extensive digital signage network. There's going to be hotels. The idea here is don't try to do all the innovation yourself. Bring it all into partners, right? So if you think about it, the idea here is we learned a bunch at Hudson Yards, and we drove a lot of innovation. And our partnerships, like with Verizon and other key leaders, helped us drive innovative products. We're going to do it on like 2.0 in Santa Clara, because when you're in the heart of Silicon Valley, it's the perfect spot to do product launches. It's the perfect place to test and beta test ideas. And we think of it as a living laboratory. So that's going to be Santa Clara, and that will be, an amazing environment. Then you got Brent Cross South, which is north of London, which will have an interesting component as well, because it's the live, work, play. The play is really about athleticism and engagement, and it's going to be one of the epicenters of, you'll have your retail, you'll have your office space, that there's no doubt about that, but there's a whole new concept of like an athletic environment that we're going to build at Brent Cross. So again, same kind of concept, adapt and overcome, be agile, but more importantly, pull in the right partnerships. And we've got probably 3 years before these officially are going to open. So like everything we did at Hudson Yards, we can do 2.0 or 3.0, right? And depending upon what the infrastructure and whether it's like, autonomous vehicles or the new kind of evolution of technology, which we need to track, we can now apply it to these environments and scale easily. And I think that's part of the magic of where, if you are committed to innovation, you have the right relationships, you can drive digital products, and you want to learn and be closer to your customer, these are important concepts that you can do from a development standpoint.
And maybe sticking with you for just one more second, Scott. These are beautiful looking projects. They seem to be ahead of the curve in terms of resiliency to, as we were saying, you know, the challenges of just the office market or just the residential market. I'm wondering if you have any other thoughts on either where these planning approaches have been successful or challenged by the last 18 months in particular, and what we think that the outcome of kind of work-life behavior may be as a result of that.
I think if we are listening appropriately, right, things are pivoting. I don't think anybody specifically knows where the end state is going to be, and I think an interesting touch point will be after Labor Day. And I think, again, if you have the right, I'll just go back, if you have the right tools in place and you're listening to folks that are engaging on your campus, their experiences in different asset classes, and you have the ability to pivot quickly, you can make adjustments. If there's design changes that are going to happen from a perspective of how you think about design changes, given what is going to happen in people's behaviors after the pandemic and when they return to the office, there's certain infrastructure things you can't change. But I think you can pay it forward a little bit and think about what's the next location that you can affect. And I think we all have to be agile. I think it's not set in stone, and I don't think anybody really has the answer yet. I think there's a lot of concepts and theories, but I don't think people really know. The only way we'll do is to listen louder. That's why God gave me 2 big ears to listen to our customers.
Agreed. I say that sometimes from the PLASTARC perspective, we're focused on humans. If we think about some of the humanness of our habits and our preferences, then it won't matter whether it's this trend or that, because we're kind of focused on the things that are long lasting. We have extended the conversation enough here to engage our audience, and we have a question in the chat for you, Scott. Actually, before we go to the one that is that polling question, is if you had one lesson learned from your experience at Hudson Yards, maybe one thing to do differently next time, what it might be. Can I put you on the spot for that, Scott?
No problem. Things I would do differently. Well, first off, it's ironic. You need a pretty solid budget structure in place if you're going to do it, build a digital ecosystem around a mixed use environment. I learned a lot about the real estate allocation model and how that works. And I think like what we've done to kind of change what we did at Hudson Yards was by bringing all the assets and the stakeholders together, we established what the budgetary kind of like guidelines and capital levels that need to be committed in to build a digital ecosystem and sustainable ecosystem. That is something that needs to be established. Now we've established it at Brent Cross. Now we established it at Santa Clara and every other development we're involved in. But like that was a huge learning, because then you're spending your energy on the innovation and the building versus spending your energy on the education. And education is required to bring everybody along because it's a new concept in real estate. But I think that's a major thing I would do differently if I could go back.
That's a fascinating point, and maybe one for any of the students that we have listening here. You mentioned that term stakeholders. I jokingly say that I use my poli-sci degree every day, but my architecture degree, you know, even though that's officially the industry I'm in, not quite as often. So thank you for sharing that, Scott. Really appreciate it. All right, as we kind of dig deeper into this conversation about returning to the office, what are people expecting? Maybe a new generation of amenities in our buildings. Maybe some data here for Scott, since those other projects are still in development. We've got 2 questions. What has been the most difficult aspect of working with a distributed team? Building culture, onboarding new team members, managing teams, cross-functional collaboration, community, communication between leaders, getting engagement across all levels, or other. And you can tell us your perspectives in the chat box. And then question number 2, what is the key driving factor in your return to the office? Are you missing equipment, in-person meetings, workforce accountability, tech connectivity, household distractions, on-site amenities, or nothing, you're just fine where you are, happy to stay working from home. Or once again, if you'd like to check other, tell us your perspective in the chat box there. So realize that was probably one of our more complicated polling questions, so I'll give you a minute to read those and answer that question. So what has been the most difficult aspect of working with a distributed team is building culture, kind of spreading that virtual culture, maybe something else we could learn from you, Scott. Then Ty for onboarding new team members, managing teams, and a couple cross-functional and getting engagement across all levels. I think it's quite interesting. We used to hear a lot more answers for getting engagement across all levels. Not sure if that's less important here or maybe something we've solved for. That would be interesting to know. What is the key factor in driving your return to office? We've got most of our respondents excited about in-person meetings and workforce accountability. Sorry, we don't have anyone going for on-site amenities there, though, to be fair, we have a little bit of a small sample here. So I think it's still an important attractor. So thank you for our participants there. Adam, I realize we've only got a few more minutes of your time, so I'm going to hit you as the first to answer this question. We've been asking these questions around, what is it important for employers to focus on? What are these pain points of telework? Even going back to the early days of lockdown, where we were still kind of reeling from the changes in our world. I'm wondering what your perspectives are on where organizations should be focusing their energy right now. I know in many organizations, there's a tug of war between kind of the tactical return to office right this minute and the long-term planning, and would just love your perspective on kind of maybe guiding organizations in where to focus their energy right now.
You gave me the easy one first. This is going to be one of the things that employers need to really think about, especially as they want to return to the office. As we are living in an increasingly globalized economy and workforce, the things that attract top talent are going to be different for each sector, for each industry and employer. And where some employees, especially those who are working on things directly related to technology or media, who feel like they can do their work from anywhere, flexibility in where and when they work may be some of the top drivers. For those who feel drawn to the office, those on-site amenities, although we didn't see many results for that, and the workplace itself may be a key driver. What Scott had said about listening forward and having 2 ears, I think, is where the employers who are going to succeed in this next iteration of the economy are going to excel the most. The folks who can listen to their employees and understand their needs best, and then allocate resources to executing on that, are going to do the best in this next stage.
Excellent. And another good optimistic note for you to leave us on, Adam. And I hope you have a great time in your on-site experience with your group there. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you. And great conversation. Thanks.
Absolutely. All right, Michael, over to you. Would be interested in your perspective on a similar topic here, being what are really the focus points at this moment in time, maybe especially thinking about what you as an organization have learned over the last 18 months.
I think what we've learned is there are a couple of the themes that we've talked on, in the last hour. One, the collaboration, the building of culture are huge, but we're also slower in decision making. Being able to get to that executive, to get that quick answer. I think when we talk about how we've framed, you know, a multi-state, multinational workforce, it's ensuring those that are not in the physical office, you create an equitable delivery of technology, and that's been a huge part of the investment, is to make sure, you know, we've all been in those meetings in the past where you've got 18 people in a room, everybody's back here, and there's 3 people on the phone and they can't hear the conversation. So installing more technology to make it more personal, so the 5 of us could be in a room, but if I'm speaking, you're still seeing me directly. So we're continuing to iterate on how our office evolves in that front. But it's really believing that if we make the workplace somewhere that people want to come, they will come back in droves. I'd actually, you know, kind of pivot the question and ask something to Scott, if I can, around, you know, the secret sauce and how you think about these mixed use developments and make them really special. You know, especially for the students that are learning kind of the underwriting and financing piece of the thing. When we've done it, one of our approaches is the retail is such an integral part of tying everything together. And, you know, we know the state of the retail market hasn't, you know, the pandemic did it no favors, but it wasn't necessarily thriving beforehand. And we view it through the lens of both the living laboratory, as you mentioned earlier, but also it's an opportunity to create, you know, non-quantifiable value, and therefore we underwrite it almost as a loss leader. I wonder, as you think through these new ones that are coming in Santa Clara and London, you know, you can find the best credit white tablecloth restaurants and hit your pro formas if that's what your pro forma says. So it's a little bit about setting those expectations, as Melissa said, using our poli-sci degree. But I'd be curious to think how you think about kind of maybe underwriting, not to be too granular, but building that glue that stitches that mixed use campus together.
Yeah, we have a unique approach, because in some cases we own a lot of the restaurants, and in some cases we are underwriting some of the retail. And I think it's an interesting dynamic of, we have a group called Related Urban that is focused on creating the experience. And I think the key of, like, how do you curate the right restaurant spectrum, right? From a food perspective, how do you curate the right retail environments? Like we do things like, we have Roan and Mac Weldon, like we call them like digital first organizations that we put in a certain area at Hudson Yards to learn and like partner with them. We have restaurants where I think, you know, we're pivoting right now. One of the things, the question is like, what is missing at Hudson Yards? Well, one of the things is, like, I think just generally affordable food in a food court environment that I think like has a great amount of diversity. These are the kind of concepts that I think we try to support. We like Related Restaurant Group, and we have Related Urban, and they think about how does that pivot as we go to the next area, right? So Santa Clara, like, and how do you think about how to evolve? Because it's constantly evolving. And like, whether it's underwriting or investing, I'm just going to pivot a little bit, because the theory of the case has always been like, how do you maintain innovation, specifically around customers and where you're going? So what we did is we want to know where the market's going and how do we keep our fingers on the market. And so what we started up is a prop tech group. It's fintech, it's prop tech, it's construction tech, it's every version of technology, because that's where a lot of the innovation's happening. And if you look at some of the valuations that are happening in these companies, whether it's headless commerce and retail, right? Or whether it's you know, Latch and some of these other organizations, you got to have your finger on the pulse. And we have a group that meets, just speaking of innovation, every Monday, and they're all subject matter experts in different components of our business. And we look at deal flow to understand innovative pilots and where can we actually take concepts and truly pilot them to see if there's value across our entire ecosystem. And I think that's part of our secret sauce. There's placemaking secret sauce, and we're constantly evaluating it and underwriting it and thinking about it, investing in it. And then there's innovative technology secret sauce, where we're looking for what is the next like mobile key solution? How does that work? How can we pull different microservices and test them? And because we've got a pretty interesting digital ecosystem, we can test and learn really quick. And if we like it, will scale. And I think that's just part of the magic that you have to constantly do and think about. And I think that's the learning for everybody here. It's like you're never really done. Technology is never perfect nor finished.
And if you think of your workplace in that same vein, you're going to become very stale very, very quickly. Exactly. So absolutely true on the kind of the bigger development side. I would totally agree. But even as a corporate user, as someone who's designing space, you have to be thinking about, you know, what's good today is already outdated, and you need how are you iterating and going forward on it. So
well, thank you both for that. I think I'm going to swap the last two questions here to keep the paddle ball going. Michael, we've all heard a lot about this word hybrid this, hybrid that, hybrid the other thing. I think it's been the word of the day for the last 2 months. Could you give us a little bit of an understanding of what that means from your perspective? Is that a term that you're using or that you think is helpful in describing a future way of working that is maybe a bit technology and a bit physically based? And if it has any particular relationship to the TAMI tenancy that we've been talking about today.
I think that's going to be the operative word moving forward. I think what's going to be most interesting is technology enabled us to be hybrid well before COVID. We've been studying our workplace utilization for years to try and understand, like you said, Melissa, all those data points. Just the more information you have, the more decisions you can make. 50% occupancy on Mondays, it ticks up Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday it drops off a cliff. So we are utilizing hybrid. There's 3 typologies that we're implementing with our return to office. There's at home, so you're 100% at home based. There's full on 100% in the office, and there's hybrid, and we're probably 5 to 10%, 80 to 90%. 5 to 10%, give or take, with the majority being within the hybrid. And the biggest challenge that we're working through and stressing that agility is the policies and procedures around what it means to be hybrid. Because if we just, said, okay, book your space, how are you going to go about approaching it? We know what's going to happen. You're going to have everybody book Tuesday through Thursday. And so you can't, to use an outdated phrase, maybe over leverage the space. But if you're trying to create a certain environment or manage the amount of people in the building, especially in these early days, the Delta variant's still out there, and we don't want to have an oversubscription per se, putting some policies and procedures behind how you define hybrid is important. So we are doing that. So we are saying that, you kind of can't block Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Now that's just for your standard approach. That agility and flexibility has to be live. So I can book that I'm in and it shows up my work profile on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, by way of example. But if I have a meeting with my boss or with my team on Wednesday, I can always go ahead and book a space. So you're forcing everybody to use the technology, using sensors, using all that information. We're managing it. So hybrid is we believe the way that has existed for years, just because technology has enabled us, and it will continue to be that way. It's really about how those policies and procedures evolve with the utilization, with our behavior, and it's really again centered on those hubs. So I think that answered. I hope.
Yeah, no, it's helpful, and I think one of the challenges everyone is experiencing is really what you laid out, which is that 80 to 90% of the population is potentially hybrid, but hybrid could mean everything from 4 days a week in the office to 1 day a week in the office. And that's a huge difference in terms of, everything from the amount of space you're going to need to what are the resources that you're going to need to bring, even to operate a cafeteria, right? You can't, we all need a lot more information and maybe predictability, does the cafeteria change its food and beverage order on a rainy day in the future, et cetera?
And then are you weekly, bi-weekly, monthly? Not just 1 to 4 days a week, but then what's the cadence?
And end of quarter, end of season, the marketing season versus the finance season, et cetera. Yeah, it's a lot of variability for us all to be thinking about.
Yes.
And maybe back to you, Scott. I know this is a bugbear for so many of us, but I'm fascinated by some of the locations that you're developing properties. I noticed this morning even that the COVID traffic reduction seems to be over, and we're still stressing over the kind of the safety of public transportation. I even heard someone the other day say, we stopped talking about self-driving cars for the last year. What's up with them right now? So I'm wondering if you could just kind of share some of your thoughts or some of the things that you think are significant as we think about where we put our buildings, what technology we use, and how this will be impacting either transportation or our commutes in the future. And Scott, maybe you could answer that, and we'll come back to you, Michael, on the same in a moment.
I think it's an ever evolving playing field, but we primarily have been a company that's looked at like gateway cities, right? And I think we're going to like more like different cities now, not just like New York City or like, that we're going to like additional cities that we traditionally would not have gone to, because I think there's been a change in where people are moving to. That's one thing, which I think will be interesting. I don't think autonomous vehicles will continue to be an element. There's no doubt. There's just too much money, capital behind it. And I think the question becomes, as you think about like mixed use campus, are you properly designing for them to be functioning? And that's technology that will evolve over time. I believe that people are, the balance now is, if I'm hybrid, like what's the level of effort for me to go and commit the time to the commute, right? And what's the utility versus me working from home? And I think that to me comes about like informational asymmetry, whether it's going to work or coming home. And what we're seeing is people are demanding information about, all right, when are the trains running, how often, what's happening, what's going on, and that metadata will continue to build, because like, specifically around New York City, a lot of folks are concerned about the subway, they're concerned about public transit, so they want that data, so they make that decision, does it make sense or not, especially when they're going to be leaving. And part of that is data that we can provide them by just like natural feeds and transit hubs and transit integration, and we're thinking about that. So I think it's going to be a pretty interesting environment, because I think people aren't going to come back on a regular basis, and it'll be more of a hybrid model. And so I think what's going to really play out, and I think will be very interesting, specifically around large urban cities, is what's the impact on the local economy if X percentage of individuals aren't coming into the office anymore. And then I think then your amenities and your experiences all take a pivot as well. And transit's just one of them. So I don't have an answer. I don't pretend to have an answer, but it's something to track.
Excellent. Thank you for your thoughtfulness on that, Scott. Michael, I know that Verizon dabbles in transportation side of the infrastructure equation, and I know that we all think about it, because you can't get to a workplace without it. And if we think about from a sustainability perspective, there's so much impact of where we choose to put our buildings in relation to where people are, et cetera. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on what we just heard from Scott, or what you think might be the impact of public or private transportation for the future of workplace.
I mean, I think Scott, not to completely punt, hit the nail on the head. I mean, we know what we don't know, and our portfolio very likewise is we're expanding to, we're very heavily centered on transit-oriented development. So we need multimodal access to all of our spaces. We have a multi-generational workforce. So when we're thinking about new developments, be it the one we're building in Boston or Santa Clara, it's on public transit. It's got access to private transportation. There's a number of 5G applications and use cases that we run an autonomous shuttle in Basking Ridge to take folks back and forth from our hotel property to our office space. So there's product development. We have a whole smart city group that is rolling out how you automate the public nature of transit, how you make it more green, how you make it more efficient. And similar to Scott's point is we think about this hub and spoke idea, and we believe in more hubs, not one hub. And the workplace, I keep repeating myself and saying it's as a destination, but the spoke aspect becomes less prominent, because you're going to the office to do something purposeful, where you're going to collaborate, you're going to work with others. So if you're doing head down work, I don't need to leave my apartment and go to a WeWork to sit by myself. I can sit by myself here. So and our policies mirror that, so that I'm not getting on, whether it is public or private transportation, to get to that office. If I'm not doing something purposeful, I'm reducing the amount of transportation that I'm impacting. So we think about it when we plan, and we're thinking about it from a product side as to how do we better optimize existing infrastructure, be it with public-private partnerships.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Michael and Scott. I think maybe we even see what a next panel discussion might be, Shannon. I think there's a lot to talk about in relation to urban design, urban infrastructure, how we use it, how we move around in it. These topics of transportation and sustainability, I'm sure, are important to both your students and your alumni. Of course, also thank you to Adam Goldstein, even though he has signed off already, as well as Amy Rosen from our PLASTARC team, who's been the magic behind the technology working here. Any final thoughts or any questions that I neglected to ask Scott or Michael that you're urgent to tell our audience?
Nothing really. I think it was a great conversation. I think your hypothesis is right, and it's all centered, as we think forward, in being flexible and agile and adapting, because what the world looks like, and we've seen it, what the world looks like 5 years ago is not what the world looks like today, and that transcends into workplace, people's habits, how we approach the office, priorities of upcoming generations and generations that have been in the workforce for 30 years. So. Right. If the second you go stale, the second you stop learning is the second you fail.
Great, thank you for that. Any closing words, Scott?
That's just a great world to innovate in. I think everybody just needs to take the opportunity, take the risk, and don't be too worried about the outcomes, because nothing ventured, nothing gained. And I think that's what I think we're trying to instill here at Related and in real estate. And I think if you listen to the right people and listen, you will make the right decisions. But you know what? It's a great world, and we're going to have a lot of fun building out these mixed-use environments.
Cool. Well, thank you again. And I'm going to pass it back to Shannon to wrap us up and let you know where you can find the recording if you want to pass along this conversation.
Thank you, Melissa. Thanks to all our panelists and guests today, and of course our fantastic team at PLASTARC. I appreciate you all being here. You can check out our Goodman Center for Real Estate events page, and you can find all of our recordings there of past events and upcoming events coming your way. Thank you, everyone.